Hey everyone, welcome back to the channel. If you're new here, my name is Zach, and here we talk about overlanding, gear, builds, DIY, all sorts of stuff related to modifying your vehicle. Today we are going to be talking a little bit about 35s. I want to show a little bit of how to fit 35s, and then I'm also going to kind of show you these two 35-inch tires to compare. I'm not going to finish the full comparison in this video because I want to kind of showcase this process of putting them on first, and then we'll do a bit of comparison side by side. So before I get into this video though, I want to give a huge shout out to Relation Race Wheels. They've been a huge sponsor of me for a long time now. They've sponsored this set of mono-forged wheels. It's one of their newer offerings, so go check those out. I'll have them linked down below. I also have a 5% discount code at their website, so if you're just looking for your wheels, you can go to their website, and that works on basically everything on their website. On my old wheels, I have their hybrid system with beadlock rings. So you can pinch one of the beads with a ring and it simulates a sort of hybrid bead lock. And if you don't want to do that, you can run a protection ring, which is actually really nice because if you're off-roading and you catch a rock with your wheel, you aren't going to necessarily bang it up really bad, and you can always just replace that protection ring. So, or if you're someone who doesn't do trails all the time, buy a set of them, toss them on when you go wheeling, and then just pull them off when you're in town if you don't necessarily love the look of them. But yeah. Relation Race Wheels, huge supporter of me. I really love their stuff. They're really sharp. Their bronze rims especially are really sharp because they aren't kind of this gold look. They're a lot darker. It's kind of a matte and dark bronze look, and I really like it. I think it's sharp, and it's a nice difference between just getting a black wheel. The other company I really want to thank is TrailBuilt Off-Road. They're based in Wisconsin, kind of right outside Green Bay, so not too far from home, which is really awesome to work with a company kind of closer by. TrailBuilt Off-Road is an awesome company that basically offers tons of different brands of wheels and tires, and what they'll do is they will assemble them, they'll mount, they'll balance them, they'll put TPMS sensors in them, and they will bring all those tires onto a pallet and then ship them straight to your door. And if you're a guy who has a floor jack and a couple of tools and maybe a torque wrench, you can put these on for yourself and save yourself a little bit of money, and also not have to pay for all those other things I just mentioned. So all you have to do is buy your tires and your wheels directly from them, and they'll do the rest and bring it right to your door. And all those extra things I mentioned are free. All you got to do is pay for the wheels and the tires. And for a lot of you out there, if you're getting started with your build or you're upgrading, sometimes it's just best to get both at the same time. It kind of sucks because it's a big price to pay right off the bat, but for some of you out there that are wanting to run bigger tires, you really should consider running a wider rim. So TRD Off-Road wheels are a 7.5-inch wide rim, and TRD Pro wheels are only 7 inches wide. If you look at a lot of these tire manufacturers, just a 33-inch tire oftentimes will recommend a wider rim than that. Now, plenty of people do it. You can go in the forums, lots of people don't have any problems. So it's just, I think, more of a precautionary tale based on the manufacturer's recommendations. But it's something to keep in mind, and if you're gonna go larger than 33-inch tires, you're definitely gonna wanna consider a wider rim. So if you are upgrading just from the TRD Off-Road or TRD Pro wheels to some aftermarket wheels, this may be a great time, and consider TrailBuilt Off-Road. And I might even have like a little drop-down thing where you can tell them that I sent you, help me out, just let them know that you found out about them through me. So really appreciate that. But first, what we'll do, we'll jump out to the vehicle. I'm gonna show you some of the different modifications I've done on the 4Runner to fit 35s. And then after that, we will talk about comparing these two different 35s, because basically I have two wheel and tire packages here that I'm going to be testing. I've already tested the one for a while now. I'm gonna test these other ones and kind of report back. But one weighs 103 pounds and the other weighs 80 pounds. And it's pretty crazy difference looking at the two of them. So let's jump right out to the vehicle and let's start talking about what you gotta do to fit these tires, and then we'll talk about comparing the two. All right, let's jump into it. Okay, so I wanna talk through a couple things that I've done to fit these 35s, and honestly, haven't even been able to fit them super well. I'm still working on it. So this kit is not released, but for starters, I have a fender delete kit from C4. It's part of their OTF kit they're developing for the 4Runner. I was lucky enough to get a prototype kit. So right now, I just have their fender liner. It's also going to come with a body mount relocation. As you can see, I still rub on my firewall quite a bit, including rubbing on my body mount. So that's gonna need to be relocated, cleaned up, and even this, I don't know if I need to hammer that back more or what. I don't want a tub, but maybe inevitable. This I've really cleaned up through here. It's getting a little rusty, but I did the pinch weld bend over where you basically cut a couple slits in your pinch weld here and you just keep on mauling it to bend it over this direction and help create some clearance there. So I've done that as well. There's a bracket in here and everything that I've basically completely cut off. The fender liner kit comes with a bracket that you can put right in here that helps to kind of pin this in place. I just haven't bolted it down yet. You can kind of see it's just got some play in it, but it doesn't rub on anything and actually stays in place fairly well, so I haven't bothered with it yet. Some kind of little friendly reminder, those bolts love to seize. So once in a while, I feel like even if your alignment's perfectly fine, it's probably good to pull them out and put some anti-seize on them so they don't seize up. That could just be a Minnesota thing though. Another thing you're going to want to do with 35s is add spindle gussets. So these are the spindle gussets from Dirt King. Dirt King sells basically a raw metal kit that you can buy to add to your OEM spindles. That's what I've got going on there. If you want, you could have a fabricator notch them to still run your sway bar. That may just compromise some of their structural integrity, but it's definitely an option. Some guys will run tie rod sleeves to beefen them up, but most guys don't recommend that because it just will mean your rack's gonna fail instead of your tie rods. I'd rather have my tie rods fail if I had to pick. Another thing will likely be upper control arms. You're gonna need to run some form of positive caster, at least 3 degrees, but probably 4. So I've really only ran about 3 degrees caster, and I think that's why I rubbed some over there. So if you wanted to maximize the camber adjustment of these upper control arms so that you could run closer to 4 to 5, maybe that would be better, but I don't know if you can really run 5 degrees caster and it will actually help you with clearing that body mount. I think 4 might be ideal. If I were trying to maximize this super well, I probably would try and figure out how to adjust my camber to get a little bit farther away from my fender liner. But honestly, I only rub there on full lock, so I just try to not be at full lock and I'm typically okay. Another thing you'll likely want to do is called cam tab gussets. So you add these beefier cam tabs so those washers can't slide around, because really heavy tires oftentimes will push around your hub easier and they can bend over these tabs. A lot of people will do this mod because it's fairly inexpensive, but it is a little bit labor intensive. So if you've got a buddy that welds, buy them something to motivate them to help you do that, and that'll save you a lot of money. I'm on 488s. It's maybe slightly over re-geared, but if I keep it under 60 miles per hour, my RPMs are pretty good. I still get pretty good gas mileage. Outside of re-gearing, a lot of guys will do upgraded CV axle. You don't need to make it longer, but they sell these high angle boots, which are pretty good. But of all the people I've talked to prevent CV axle failure, the key is to just not give it a lot of gas when you're fully turning left or right. And that seems to be good. Outside of that, the other thing you can do is a diff drop. Diff drops are kind of highly debated, but there's not weird vibrations on my front drive shaft. So I've kept my diff drop because I think it really helps with the CV axle angle, and so I think it's worth keeping. That's the other thing too, is if you're gonna go with heavy springs, just make sure your heavy springs don't push your lower control arm down so much that all of a sudden your hub is pretty low and you've got a really strong lift, and so this axle angle is really bad. Another thing people do with 35s is they'll upgrade their brakes. I'm actually running AutoZone Duralast Gold brakes. Nothing fancy. They're not incredible, but they're not bad. I don't live in the mountains, so I don't see a lot of hills. I could see having 35s and hills being really important to have a big brake kit, but in Minnesota here, fairly flat. It's been no problem having these Duralast brakes. And if you engine brake plenty, that also helps too. Another thing that people do when they get 35s is they'll upgrade their steering rack. I have not done that, but I may consider it, being that I think my steering rack is slowly going, but it's not leaking enough fluid or doing anything too scary to where I feel like I need to go swap it out tomorrow. Another thing will be extended bump stops. So there's an extended bump stop there. A lot of people with 35s will bang into this at full compression, and that can cause issues with your fender liner literally bending up into the engine bay. So there's a couple options. You can take away up travel by adding some spacers to that bump stop there, or gosh, I think maybe sometimes people do limit straps. There's a couple of different options, but that's one thing to also consider. Part of the fender liner kit meant cutting away some of this flare up here. So they include like a template to cut away that flare. And so I did that, and that's helped to sort of have plenty of clearance for the 35s as well, but it's a little bit different and may not be necessary depending upon what you're doing, but that's another thing to consider when going to 35. That's the bulk of it. It's not the worst thing to do, but I would say the most important thing is the re-gear, and then also now testing out some different weights of tires. So those are kind of different things I'm doing right now to see what I can do. That kind of gives you a sneak peek, or at least a bit of a list as to things you'll have to consider if you want to run 35s. Grab our handy dandy Hercules brushless Ultra Torque 1/2-inch impact. We'll take these off. Just like a pit crew. So I just got done redoing my lower control arms and my tie rods. They're brand new. Maybe you can see them or not, but the 4Runner drives like a dream. Just got a brand new alignment and everything, so no better time than to try out some new rims or new wheels and tires. Oh my gosh, these are so much lighter. That's crazy. I was not expecting that. So like I've probably already mentioned, these new wheels are, I think, over 20 pounds lighter. So I'm looking forward to testing these out and seeing what a difference that makes for this setup. So we'll put these on, and then last but not least, we'll have to put on the new center cap, which is their new billet center caps, which are pretty sweet. Once we get finished swapping all the tires over though, we'll kind of go into detail a little more about the rims. Okay, so I'm paranoid up here in the Midwest, especially in Minnesota. Rust is especially bad, so I'm gonna put a little anti-seize on these. Got a paper towel here to make sure I wipe off any excess. And then we'll start these. Just like so. Another thing that I do is I've got wheel locks, so these don't get stolen. That would suck. Line that up with this hole. There we go. All right, I got my little baby Hercules tool here. And this is just this is a metric 6. That's all we're gonna do. All right, well, here are the two tires side by side, and the deed has been done. I'm gonna kind of talk through comparing these tires a little bit, and then from there, we'll kind of do a little bit of an assessment. But the first thing I think that's really interesting about these tires is these are both 35 12.5 by 17-inch tires, but they have very different weights and different specs. The Baja Boss AT from Mickey Thompson has a low D rating. I'll break that down exactly, the spec on the screen right now and what that means. This has a load C rating, but I feel like load ratings can come in different forms and sizes and sometimes mean different things at different manufacturers. So I'm going to put that all on the screen so that I can type it out and I don't have to just say it to you. As for the rim setups we have here, this is either the RR7S or the RS7S. Basically, it's their non-hybrid mono-forged version. It's a very lightweight tire. It's one of their newer offerings. That is an RR6-H. It's a hybrid rim. It is not a mono-forged rim, and it is set up with the bead lock right now. So these rims, or these wheels, whatever you prefer to call them, they have about a 20.8 or 21 pound weight per wheel or rim. And then the RR6s, these kind of OG ones, these are not mono-forged. And with the hybrid style, they're like 28 pounds just for the wheel, and then another 3 pounds for the bead lock ring. So if I remember correctly, this tire is around 59 pounds, and this tire is around 72 to 73 pounds. So between the two, we're cutting, I think, around 20 pounds of weight by going to this tire. So I've got my scale here. I want to actually weigh them and just compare that first. So if we roll this up onto the scale, scale is reading 103 pounds for this wheel and tire setup. And then if we come here, which actually checks out, because that rim and bead lock setup is probably 31 and that wheel is probably 72 pounds. This tire setup is exactly 80 pounds. Wow, that's crazy. So we shed 23 pounds per tire. Okay, so another thing to note here that you may notice is these mono-forged rims actually have a bit of like a rose gold tint to them. And these ones have almost a black tint to them. So they're not the exact same bronze hue. I don't think it's bad, but it's just two different types of bronze. I think with the particular light, depending upon how you're looking at them, you wouldn't really be able to tell the difference. Also, these rims are kind of dirty, so they're probably closer even than now, and there's a good chance maybe this paint has faded a little bit. I've had these wheels for quite a while. Okay, so some other things I want to talk about. Since these are bead lock mounted, they are a little bit more challenging to balance, and some shops struggle with balancing them. So that's a bit of a pitch here for Trailbuilt Off-Road. Trailbuilt Off-Road sends you your wheels and tires to your door with TPMS, mounted and balanced, everything all ready to go, which is pretty awesome. And that is something they can do with these bead lock mounted wheels as well. So that's really sweet. But I want to do a bit of a side-by-side comparison here and just show you these two tires. So like I said, Load D Baja Boss AT, Load C Toyo Open Country AT3. If we just look at the tread pattern that likely is going to be contacting the ground, it's about 10 inches wide here. If we look at the tread pattern that's going to be contacting the ground on this, it's probably 10.5. Now another thing that I noticed big time is if you bead lock mount any sort of actual tire, it pulls the tire a little bit wider. So right now it's a little bit hard to compare because this is mounted on the bead like normal. This is bead locked with the bead lock ring. So what happens is it pulls the tire a little wider, and I think also takes a little bit of the height away from it by doing that. So it's a little hard to compare these. But like I said, 10 inches wide, 10.5 inches wide. And then for height here, this tire is about 34.5 inches tall. And if I was looking at my Baja Boss AT, this is probably a 34.25 to maybe a 34.125. If you stand them side by side, you can easily tell that this tire is shorter, but when you look at them from top down, the Baja Boss AT wheel is leaps and bounds wider than this AT3, which again, really interesting considering both of these tires are a 35 by 12.5 by 17 tires, so they're the exact same size. This is pretty well documented though, that like basically tire sizing is out the window when it comes to these sorts of companies. So that's a little bit about their sizing. We already talked about their weight. Something about the looks. Both of these are negative 25 millimeter offset wheels. So I wanted to keep that kind of consistent. I really like the look of my Baja Boss ATs. I like tire poke. I also like a little bit more aggressive sidewall. So you can see here on the side of these tires, it is a bit more on the aggressive side. And one thing I will note is when we go to these open country AT3s, a lot of that aggressive sidewall kind of goes out the window. Now, you guys are probably thinking, like, Zach, you seem to be kind of bashing these AT3s. Like, what's the deal? Why'd you even pick them in the first place? Well, one thing I wanted to look into was this wheel and tire combo weight is 80 pounds on the nose. And I wanted to see if I could figure out a 33-inch wheel comparison just to throw up on the screen. So I'm gonna throw up 3 different 33-inch tire options on the screen just to kind of compare, because a lot of people talk about how 35s are really hard on your vehicle and they're hard on your wheel bearings and they're hard for your steering rack to turn and all these sorts of things. And I wanted to see if this wheel and tire setup on 35s, if I could roughly match the weight of a lot of 33-inch setups. So that was a challenge of mine. The other thing I really wanted to do was find a lightweight 35. They're a little bit hard to come by, but I had 285, 75, 17, so 34-inch AT3s, and I actually really loved them. They were the tires that I had before these 35s, and if you were wanting to run a tire without re-gearing, I would say that tire was borderline perfect for that. I didn't re-gear, they were 34s, and I really liked the look of them. I like them with negative 32 millimeter offset. When those 285, 75, 17 AT3s were beadlock mounted, they were a little bit wider, which I really liked as well. So just a lot of pros of running that tire, and I really liked how lightweight that 34-inch tire was, because I knew going from a 33 to a 34 and not re-gearing, I needed a lighter tire, and I really liked it. Another reason I like this tire is when you kind of think of the trifecta of tires, a lot of people like to run all-terrain tires for their ability in rain, snow, and mud. This is a triple peak rated tire. A lot of the ones people really consider are AT3s, the open countries, the KO2s, and the Falcon Wild Peak AT3Ws. So of the other two, when I ran those 34s, I actually really like these. Wild Peaks can be good, but they're pretty expensive and they're very heavy. And KO2s can be good, but I think their quality has been slowly sliding. At least that's what a lot of people have mentioned to me. I had a set of KO2s a while back. I didn't have any problems with them, but they seemed to wear pretty fast and be on the soft side. They weren't bad in performance, but I chose to not go with those either because I think they're still heavier than the AT3s. I've heard a lot of great things about the open country AT3s. And with them being lighter, I think they're just kind of a perfect tire for daily driving and off-roading. So that is why I picked this tire, and that's why I wanted to compare it to the Baja Boss AT a little bit here, because the great thing about working with Trailbuilt here is I don't have any sort of bias towards Toyo or Mickey Thompson. I'm not sponsored by either of them, but I wanted to compare them, and after testing so many different tires, The Baja Boss ATs are easily my favorite tire, but I really wanted to compare them to this and just see if the weight savings was worth it to go back to the AT3s, because I also really like these as well. So stay tuned. I'm going to make another video kind of as a follow-up to this, but I wanted to showcase these a bit side by side and just talk about kind of two very different tire setups that you can go with, which is, you know, a very sleek, lightweight wheel with a very light, not as strong sidewall, minimal grip on the sidewall, and lighter weight all-terrain tire. So it's really more, I mean, this wheel in my opinion is kind of more like a easier trails and forest road kind of tire. I don't know if this would be the best option in rocks. Also with the softer sidewall, like airing down might get a little bit sketchier than when you air down a stiffer sidewall. It just kind of depends, I think, especially depends on the weather, the rubber compound, and everything in between. But I'm excited to compare these. So they're kind of the different sides of the spectrum in regards to wheels. But yeah, if you don't care about weight and you're just trying to pick the absolute best tire, I don't know of a better wheel and tire setup than this right here. These wheels are insane. They're so strong. They do great in the mud. They do great in the snow. The sidewall is super, super aggressive and beefy. It doesn't really flex a whole lot even when you air down. And then, not to mention my beadlock setup, I've aired these down way low for snow wheeling especially. And yeah, they were crazy. So absolutely love this wheel and tire setup. Don't get me wrong, I'm not switching away from it. And after putting these tires on, I'm not gonna lie, I'm a little sad just looking at the rig. These were so beefy. They've got a wide stance. I love the deep interior. The beadlock ring is mean. Just everything about it is a sweet setup. So we will have to see though. I want to compare these and see what sort of mileage I get and see if I can maybe convince some of you out there that 35s really aren't so bad. So these ones right now, the 35s I have, running them with this setup, I've actually been getting around 14 to 15 miles per gallon commuting to and from work. I typically don't go above 60 miles per hour and I drive about 15 to 20 miles and it's really not too bad. And that's city driving too, so that's stop and go at times and it's really not too bad. So that's kind of the baseline with what we're working with. Hopefully that's going to be an improvement, which would be absolutely sweet. So yeah, stay tuned. I'm re-geared to 488s, so that kind of tips the scale a little bit here because I'm not running either of these 35s without being re-geared. But if you're going to go to 35s, I think you almost should have planned on the calendar when you're going to be getting re-geared. So, all right. Well, these are the two tires. Let's start to compare them and I'll report back. So this is a bit of a comparison, but it's also a bit of just an introduction. Like I said, with my old wheel and tire setup, I'm getting 13 on a bad day, but typically 14 to 15 miles per gallon driving to and from work on 35s with 488s, which I think is pretty dang good. Like I said, they weigh about 103 pounds, which is a pretty heavy wheel and tire setup. I do love these tires, so I'm a little bit sad to be testing out some different stuff, but it's in the name of R&D, kind of reporting back and seeing what will be the best setup, or at least areas where maybe you can improve your miles per gallon. So thank you to Relation Race Wheels and Trailbuilt for sponsoring this video, because it's very challenging to do a comparison like this because these, you know, setups get really expensive. And also a lot of people out there are married to one tire brand, so it's really hard to compare two different tire brands. And I just kind of personally picked these off of testing different tires. I've tested Duratrax, I've tested Yokohama Geolander MT003s, KO2s, Falcon Wild Peaks, AT3s, these Mickey Thompsons, and then another set of AT3s. And so yeah, I've picked these two because they're kind of my two favorites for the given reasons. And all-terrain tires just overall seem to typically be the better all-around. Obviously mud terrains would be in a different ballpark here, but yeah, we'll see how this turns out. If you want to look into traction more, I'm more looking into kind of miles per gallon and just a little bit of some anecdotal like testing, as well as using my ScanGauge 3 to measure my miles per gallon based on having the 35s and using the GPS speed adjustment, which is just like a % adjustment built in where you can measure your speed with a GPS and then adjust that accordingly. So that's how I'm taking my data here. It's not necessarily the most precise, but it's definitely better than just using the gauge cluster on the 4Runner. If you want to look at traction though, I would definitely recommend you check out the Tinker's Adventures channel. He did a comparison of like skinny 35s versus wide 35s. I think using the Baja Boss ATs, which is a sweet video, and also love Baja Boss ATs. So, and also not sponsored by Mickey Thompson. I really just like them. So go check out his video as well, where he's done that comparison if you're wanting to look a little more into that. But yeah, that's going to be it for this video. Like I said, I will report back after trying these out for a bit. But in the meantime, thank you so much for your support. I hope that I kind of helped you give a little bit of an idea of what it is like to run 35s. And there will be another video coming that'll probably be really in depth as to how to run 35s, or at least how I'm running the 35s, because there's lots of different ways you can do it, and there's a lot of different compromises you can make if you really want to. If you don't care about the wear and tear, or you want to save some money or whatever, you may just deal with some cost later on. But you know, everyone is willing to kind of run stuff how they want, and that's why on my channel I just try to share kind of what I'm doing, and maybe that can inspire people to, you know, look into the way that I'm doing it, or maybe they look into others. I think that these videos hopefully are a little bit more in-depth and maybe explain the logic and some of the reasoning behind some of the things I do, and that's not always easy to kind of extrapolate from the forums. So hopefully this is sort of helpful and you found some value in this video. If you did, please consider subscribing, give this video a like. Those are all the things that really help me out and help me be able to make more content like this. So until next time, thank you so much for the support. I'll catch you all in the next video.